unleashing female power.
Being a disruptor.
I'm always constantly telling the truth.
I love
art. That's all her life.
She's alive and female.
Being a woman, what it meant.
Prove him wrong.
Girls run the world.
We're rocking the place.
Welcome to the Art Pod. I'm your host, Carolina, and I'll be your guide through this Pandora's box. Strap yourselves in for a journey through the art world where we bring you candid conversations, untold stories, uncover industry secrets, and celebrate the women who are shaping its future. Because in the Art Pod, the spotlight is always on the girls. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Art Pod. My guest today is somebody very special who I really admire, Megan Skidmore. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So a little bit about Megan. Megan Skidmore is Development Director for Powerhouse Arts, a Brooklyn-based nonprofit organization committed to creative expression. Powerhouse Arts serves as a state-of-the-art art fabrication facility for ceramics, printmaking, public art fabrication, and project management, small and large metalwork, textiles, and bespoke wallpaper design and resources for artists and makers. Originally from Southern California, Megan has been an adopted New Yorker for over 17 years and has nearly 20 years of experience working in galleries, hospitality, and development at leading contemporary art museums and nonprofits. She's passionate about advocating for artists and designers and producing impactful art and cultural experiences by facilitating relationships that empower such projects. Megan was most recently director of RX Art for 8 years, where she increased and diversified institutional support and the number of annual programs and site-specific projects with commissioned artists to transform children's hospital environments throughout the U.S. and in Canada. She was previously the director of individual giving at the Museum of Arts and Design, co-founder of Artelier and Experiential Art Advisory, and worked in development and visitor services at the Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego. She earned an MA from Christie's Education in New York and a BA in Art History and Business from the University of San Diego. She is a member and champion of the Female Design Council, natural connector for friends and colleagues, and an instigator of nonprofit development support group meetings as often as possible. That sums you up, yes.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah. But I really want to start with your current role, which is the development director of Powerhouse Arts. Can you tell us a little bit first about Power Arts as an institution, what it is, what you guys do?
Sure. Powerhouse is an incredible organization that is unlike anything else that I think exists. Definitely that exists in New York and in the US. It exists in various ways, but ways that are more aligned with universities and art schools. And it's a new model. It's a new nonprofit model for really supporting artistic production in many ways. So at the core of the mission is celebrating and championing creative expression, and that's in many different ways. But at the core, when you come into our building, we are a fabrication facility of 170,000 square feet in an old power station in Gowanus, Brooklyn. And that energy is really just like pulsating through this building. You can tell that there's just been these decades and essentially a century plus of powerful industrial drive going through the ground that we are operating on and in these walls and this old historic building that has many different lives, starting from the power station that powered the trolley cars in New York City before the subway system came online, and then it became other industrial purposes in the very industrial Gowanus neighborhood, which then eventually became a Superfund site and now is a very diversifying, developing neighborhood, which is really like the new neighborhood that 80 plus square blocks are being developed into residential and commercial developments. But at the core of it, we are this last man standing fabrication facility for creative production. And at the moment we are offering, it was originally conceived to be a hive for cross-pollination between many different types of fabrication. Our founder, Josh Recknitz, is a bit of an artist and definitely a collector himself, comes from a multi-generational family of philanthropy and investment of the performing arts, the creative arts, education. And he was friends with a lot of people in Brooklyn and had had a couple of different capital type of project thoughts before Powerhouse. But when he saw the building and conceived of this beautiful vision that became Powerhouse, it was originally thought to be a building for artist studios, because so many artists have had their studios historically in Gowanus and many parts of Brooklyn. But as we see, and all these neighborhoods, we're seeing that push out as development and gentrification happens. The thought was at the time that they would only be able to build out like 200 studios. And he wanted to have the greatest impact and serving as many artists as possible. And so he started consulting with different artists, fabricators, and people in the area and in Brooklyn of what are the needs, what actually is needed at the core in the community. And everybody said, we need a safe place to make our work. We need access to resources that we don't have access to otherwise. And so it's been a long time in the making. It was incorporated, it was founded as a nonprofit organization in 2012, but because of the uniqueness of Gowanus as the neighborhood and developing the land, it's been this massive undertaking of a capital project and remediating the land, building out the huge building. They launched an architectural competition, and Herzog and Demeron won and built this, conceived and created this beautiful extension of this historic site, and they landmarked it in the process of the entire capital project and rebuilt what is now our fabrication building that houses currently ceramics, printmaking, public art fabrication, and most recently we've had two nonprofit organizations who are in Manhattan move in, and rather than meeting a sunsetting of their organizations due to many decades of sort of evolution of their mission and board fatigue and things like that, they have sunrised and they have a new life at Powerhouse, and that's Alpha Workshops, who specializes in textile design and bespoke wallpapers, and the Manhattan Graphics Center, who has always been a community print shop, and their membership range has sort of started to age out, and now they have a new life and they'll be able to do more classes. And our print shop is really like at the forefront of screen printing and the master of the techniques in that field. And the Manhattan Graphics Center now offers sort of a continuation of what print awareness is, of access for people on a more fundamental level where they can learn more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can vouch for that because I collect prints, and one of the most beautiful prints I ever received was actually produced at Powerhouse Arts. The print it's true craftsmanship. I have never seen a print made like that.
Yeah. That team has over 100 years of experience combined, and everybody that is on staff at Powerhouse and that is a part of the project is so passionate about what we all do and about the ways that we collaborate, not just within the building with the staff that is under the Powerhouse umbrella, but outwards to our community, and the constant ability to collaborate. And if we can't do a project, it's the constant from any of the shop directors saying, well, we can't take this on right now. We can do it down the road because we're so busy. But also, that's like dye sublimation. Griffin Editions down the street does it exceptionally well. Why don't we do it with them? And it's just this constant exchange.
Yeah, no, that's Powerhouse Arts. It's really incredible. I mean, I remember going to the opening when you guys first started, and there was the Miles Greenberg performance, which was, wow. It was incredible. But the building itself is gigantic.
Yeah.
So you definitely have the space for all of this.
We do. So beyond the fabrication shops, we have two huge event spaces. We have the Grand Hall and we have the Loft. The Grand Hall is about 24,000 square feet, give or take, with a mezzanine. It's really hard to talk about Powerhouse. It's so nice to be on site, and you really have to see videos or images of the project, but coming and experience the building is something completely different because it's just this monolith of a building, and it's all of these steel support columns in an otherwise open space in the Grand Hall. And every time it's activated, and that's the other chapter of the lives that it's lived that I didn't mention, is after the industrial phase and it was abandoned, artists moved in the late 90s, early 2000s and squatted there and eventually like called it home, like circuiting electricity from the neighborhood and forming a small community. And their graffiti is on all of the walls of the Grand Hall. It's in the lobby when you come in. It's throughout the admin offices. It's everywhere in the building. And it was super important as part of Josh's vision and the architectural process to maintain that, really keep it all intact, and allow all of these chapters of the building to stay as part of its fabric, which is really beautiful. So every time that space is activated, it becomes something new entirely. I mean, we've hosted the performances, which we'll be doing more of in the future. Miles Greenberg was this beautiful vision of Miles doing a simulated durational performance. And our public art team built out a pond in the center of the Grand Hall with red rock and lined it and lit it. And it was just this huge endeavor for them. And then these plinths that rotated in the water, out of the water, that the dancers jumped on and off of in this state of play while this event was going on around it. So it's just like that just took on a full life of itself. And then we've had Ula Johnson do several fashion shows. We've hosted gala dinners. So it just becomes something different every time things happen in that space.
Yeah, I remember seeing that performance. I literally didn't want to leave because I felt like it was just something new was happening all the time, even though it was like, repetitive in choreography, but it just, the performers were fantastic. The space was perfect for that performance. And you could really feel the history of the building and its integrity still there, which is, nowadays, developers come in, they just bulldoze through everything, put up something new. So it's really nice that you actually retain the history of that building.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do there and what your day-to-day looks like?
Yes. My role is entirely new. It's really interesting because Powerhouse is such a unique model. And when it was founded, it was coming from a place of Josh's mission and vision that was then really activated and launched by the core team that was in place at the time. It's been 12 years, so there have been staff changes, there have been leadership changes, and during the pandemic, a lot sort of presented itself to the organization as it did to so many other nonprofits. And it was a reckoning for Josh, for the team, for what the future of the organization should be now that the Capitol building and the project was almost done in its building form, of how do we activate projects and programs that have been underway, both in the shops and the fabrication side and on the program side. And so it was a shift, and it became a shift of switching from a very small board of 2 to growing that board and then growing the leadership and saying, okay, we're going to shift. The family foundation extended a certain number of years of funding to help support the continuation of the project during this shift. So the board brought on Eric Scheiner, who's now our president, who's a past life at the Warhol Museum and Sotheby's, both for-profit, nonprofit expertise, and really like bringing life to this specific type of factory. And then bringing on new members of the team, myself included. And so I oversee development. I'm the first development director. There were underlyings of that sort of planning in place with the core original team, but it hadn't been activated in any way. So I have the beautiful challenge of creating an entire development plan and structure from the ground up with the support of Eric and with the board and the rest of the team. I started as a team of 1.
Okay.
In April of last year. So it's just been over a year. And I stepped in right a month before that May opening to the world and opening to the public and Miles's performance. And, our first order of business was just like figuring out how to raise awareness, getting everybody on board and in the building. And our marketing director started probably a couple weeks after I did. So it was this whole new charge of team members that are all crucial to the development in all of these different ways of a nonprofit organization. But it's such a startup type of model. And even though, it's been 12 years in the making now, it's still so new. We've only had our doors really, truly open to the world for about a year. So this past year has really been a lot of R&D and like establishing the scaffolding around what has already been in place, which is the fabrication shops and the programs that have been being modeled out. We had a VP of programs join in the fall of last year. And so it's really just starting to put all these pieces into place and taking us from a one funder sourced of an organization to shifting to being a diversified, fully thriving, functioning, various streams of contributed revenue, both through the earned income through all of our fabrication shops and through the contributed income, which I'm responsible for now with an institutional giving manager and a slowly growing team, and then the rest of the team all working together. The development model for Powerhouse is very unique. It's very holistic, and I see us all as major stakeholders in it, that it is, we look at the organizational budget essentially as like a pie or a pizza, where it's like there's different slices. They may not all be the same size because of revenue is going to look different in each of the fabrication shops because of the scale and the types of projects and the level of like time and production. And then growing, starting a traditional but non-traditional sort of development system with growing the board, getting their buy-in, getting their help in advocating and expanding our donor pool, introducing us to all of the major foundations as we start to lay the framework for all of the programs and the public offerings and the ways that we're serving the community in many exciting ways. And then building out patron groups. We'll be launching our first fundraising dinner this fall, which will be really exciting. So it's many, many firsts in these first few years. So it was something I was ready for. I was really looking for a challenge, and I definitely got it. But we're all in it together. We're wrapping up our fiscal year, and we're in constant meetings with our board, and everybody sees the beauty and the massive undertaking that this scale of a project is, and like the longevity and the need for this type of space and this community hub for artists and for makers that it is. And it's so different. I think there's so many different types of education to it that's so exciting. There's so many possibilities for funding and for partnerships around this. So it's really like we're just getting started.
Yeah. No, Powerhouse is definitely in a very, very special place. It's really serving all the artists in the community. But speaking of which, because this is a huge undertaking, what are some of the challenges of the role? I'm sure there are many.
There are. Because it is years of firsts, something that my institutional giving manager, Julia, and I are coming up against, as we're talking to program officers and potential funders, is they need to see the traction. We need to be presenting, and we're just starting to lay the groundwork for what programs look like. So it's really, it's writing a business plan essentially for so many different shops, for the ones that exist, and how to best support them and make sure that we are reinforcing the staffing needs, the capacity needs before we ask them to do development projects so they can do their paid to produce projects. It's really just laying the groundwork for so many new things with a team that's all new and working together. And it's everything. It's from, everybody syncing up with IT systems and meeting systems and figuring out how to manage ourselves, provide support so the board can properly help manage us and the revenue goals and the budgets. It's this constant, it really is a startup mentality. And I think that's what's so interesting, because we're not a traditionally presenting organization like a museum or many of the other arts, visual arts centers. And we have a lot of ambitions. So it's really just figuring out, I think one of the biggest challenges has been to pace and to figure out how to push pause. And the way I look at it from the fundraising perspective is, I always want to turn a funder's no into a like not right now no, and
Okay.
have that conversation with them of them saying like, okay, well, why? Is it the person who's asking, or is it the amount, or is it the time, or the focus? That's really like fundraising, getting to know who you're asking, what you're asking for. And I think for all of us, we're really trying to figure out how that we can't be everything to everybody. And that what we do, the needs that we do want to serve, especially for under-recognized, underserved artist communities locally, specifically in New York City, through many of the programs that we're offering. So BIPOC, LGBTQ+, disabled, low-income artists, is finding the point where we fill those gaps that are not being served in the community. So it's a lot of R&D. There's so much to that. And so it's really, as a team, turning to each other and saying, not right now, no, I can do that. It's always this like Tetris of the prioritizing and the triaging of like what our needs are, where we need to be putting our attention and our focus, and then planning out.
Yeah. So by nature, development always serves to kind of fund institutions or like find funding for them. In a case like this, because Powerhouse is so special, and as we all know, arts funding is always being cut. How do you begin to establish a pool of donors for something like this?
Yeah, so I mean, we're all pulling from our previous relationships that we've brought from other places, that I've built over the years, that Julia, who's coming from McDowell and has great experience within that world and many good foundation grant writing experience and success with that organization, Eric with his many connections, our board with their many connections. We've been in the past like 6 months to this past year, been bringing people into the building. I mean, truly, I mean it when I say you have to just come in and see it. It really is, it truly is a case that we're all, it's not just saying it, but it is, if you build it, they will come. And I think that's true for everything. The building has been built. Now we're building the programs. We're building all of the opportunities in many ways. And people are starting to come. Like I've just launched a patrons program this past spring that's slowly getting off the ground as we're introducing donors to engaging ways to interact with the many, many collaborating artists that we're working with across all of the shops and our cultural partners, and finding unique ways for us to do that, creating levels of professional development and professional engagement from people in the trade, so architects, interior designers, people in media, people in other nonprofit institutions who want to find ways, and we're doing a lot of cross programming across patrons groups. It's really just pulling back the curtain, if you will, I think is the specialness in Powerhouse, is showing people the behind the scenes process and really getting people in that way is a lot of what we're doing right now, and just bringing people in for tours, starting those conversations and reaching out, because it is such a unique model. Something that we've been looking at recently is sort of some of the funding opportunities for artists that were happening around the pandemic, that came out of the urgency of the time, that came out of the duress of the time, that are waning, or those like periods of funding are winding down. And how we're starting an artist subsidy program to sort of fill that gap and have it be a long, ongoing, continued project and focus for our funding area, because it's real. It's always going to be there. Artists are always juggling, and even professionals in the art world, as we know, are always hustling to make it in New York. So we're literally trying to make the case for fundraising for how to make it in New York, like quite literally.
Please help us.
Please help us.
But speaking of programming, since you're like now getting it off the ground, what's coming up? What are you excited about?
The gala, non-gala, we're not calling it a gala.
Okay.
We're calling it an artist celebration dinner. Will be our first major fundraising dinner this October. We'll be sharing details for that very soon. It is being conceived of by a Dutch artist and chef who is incredible. And I don't want to reveal too much because there will be more to come, but it's really going to be a huge dinner that will be essentially an interactive, immersive art experience that shines a light on all of Powerhouse's fabrication capabilities, that opens, it will be for the artists and with the artists, where we'll be bringing in the people that we're asking to host tables, it'd be partners and sponsors. We're asking to seat the majority of their table with artists of all walks of life, of all levels of established or not established professional space, and from local and international representation, to essentially create like a melting pot of the artistic community. So that could mean anybody from a developer seating their construction workers to a gallery seating their artists who have done many projects with us, or our team is in the process of doing projects with, for this beautiful exchange, and not in any sort of onerous way that a lot of galas and benefits are, which is sort of the pomp and circumstance of honoring somebody with the onus of saying, you know, please make your gala, purchase a table, whatever. We'll be having those conversations, bring those people in similar ways, but it's really to uplift this beautiful, very diverse artistic community that is New York, that is the world of artists who are and makers who are producing with us, and that our teams want to be producing with. We'll be doing this really special project with our ceramics team that everybody will receive as a gift that will be part of the event. And it will be part of the Dutch consulate has launched an initiative called Future 400 that we'll be telling a little bit more about in the weeks to come. And they'll be a cultural partner for us, sort of spearheading Jasper, the artist's involvement, and then more of the programming that comes with it. So it'll be exciting.
Yeah. No,
it's
that sounds really nice.
Really beautiful vision and a big undertaking for us.
Very much so. Ceramics are definitely having a moment right now. But speaking of which, does Powerhouse also offer like workshops, or how can like regular people get involved?
So we're just getting that started. It just happened, but I'm still very excited about it because we're all coming off of the high of it. We just had our first community day, which was also a long in the making process for our team, spearheaded by our community engagement director, who's been with Powerhouse for about 5 years, Jen. And this has been her baby. It was like originally conceived as a block party, and then we thought about building it into so much more. She's really been building the connections within the community for quite some time. And so ultimately we brought in about 15 local partners from the neighborhood. So it was a chance for us to activate the building, open it up to the public again, and then bring in other partners like Textile Arts Center or Urban Glass, and then highlight the new shops who are part of Powerhouse now, Manhattan Graphics and Alpha Workshops, and really have everybody come in and have some hands-on experience. So it was for all ages, but it was just so beautiful because it was constant programming across the spaces of the Grand Hall and the Loft. And then the lobby, we had Brooklyn College's MFA show for the second year in a row. They don't have a gallery on campus. Derek Adams and their team came to us and asked if we could present it. So we presented that. It was a beautiful opportunity for us to show these local MFA artists and their work. So you came through the whole building and experienced like Brooklyn at its core, of like all of these different cultural producers. And it was a day of discovery. People were just so curious and excited. And we had dance performances, we had music performances, while the art making events were constantly going. Our ceramics team had an amphora, a huge vase that everybody could draw on and add to. The print team was doing these really awesome postcards and print polls. Everybody had something different going on that you could go and participate in, observe, learn something. So that was sort of the taste of what everybody got. It was really beautiful. It was an all hands on deck day, like all of our events will be and have been so far. But it is sort of just like the opening of the door of what's to come, which will be beautiful public programs for families, for kids, once a month, to an afternoon that leads into more professional development, paid workshops, but at an accessible level. To, with ceramics, we've had a couple of workshops that have been a paid type of rate, but with master ceramists who are something that sell out in a minute. So all of the programming is starting to build. We'll see a lot more of that open up to the world this fall. So
I'm super excited.
we will be sharing more to come as our team grows and as all of the plans grow. But it's exciting.
Yeah,
to see
I
the
can't
building
wait to
all life
take like
that.
a ceramics class.
Yeah, ceramics, and then we'll have a drink and print session this
Amazing.
fall. So it'll be a lot of like the full range. There's
Yeah.
something for everyone. And our ceramics studio also has a membership program right now too, which is great because you can rent a shelf month to month. The majority of our members, we have about 120 plus, and they essentially come in, and it's called the Community Ceramics Studio, and they've really formed a community. I mean, it's a lot of exchange, a lot of sharing with each other, resource sharing, and that's another thing that's at the core of what Powerhouse wanted to provide was resources and equipment that artists don't have otherwise in the community. So we have huge front-loading kilns that artists don't have access to otherwise, so it allows them to scale their projects up and do much larger sculptural work, or it lowers the rate for them to fire pieces because they're able to fit so many more in these massive kilns. It's really nice to be able to offer this type of equipment. Our print team and our digital print lab has been expanding constantly. So we have so much more in terms of offerings for what we can offer artists in terms of a range of fabrication capabilities. So it's that constant need for each of the shop directors to look at what type of equipment do we need to procure, and then this subsidy program that we're building out so we can roll that out starting next year. So artists who don't have funding behind them, they don't have an institution, they don't have a gallery, they can apply. And we'll do the same thing with our classes.
Oh, that's
where we're
incredible.
offering opportunities where we have X number of spots for these classes paid for, and you can apply and get those spots. And same thing with fabricating projects down the road.
Wow, that's really amazing because there's a very huge need for that in New York City. Yeah.
Completely. And the number of projects that we're not able to produce because the artists don't have the budget for it, but they're these dream, incredible visions that have not been brought to fruition now can have a second chance to be considered.
Yeah, sadly, I see that all the time. So I'm glad that, Powerhouse is really providing the space for artists to really grow.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm most excited
Yeah.
about.
What's your favorite aspect of your job, if you had to pick?
It's what is a day, and no day is the same.
Okay.
I mean, I think I'm also feeling like development director 1.0 right now, and I can't wait to see the growth of my role and what happens as we grow and as the structures all the pieces all start to settle into place, because I love bringing people into the building. I can't wait to do more of the going out and business getting and bringing people in that way, and relationship building as our teams have been stabilized and they have the capacity and there's the flow. But a tour through our building for prospective supporters and visitors is one of my favorite parts of the day, or just going up to take a break from sitting in front of my computer.
Oh, I can imagine.
And going through the shops. It's something new every single day in every one of the shops. Just seeing what's on the shelves or what's in the kilns or what any of the ceramic members are doing on the tables or on the wheels. It's different every day. And same with the print shop. I mean, they are producing 300 projects a year. So it's always something new. It's just, that constant exchange with people from the shops as we pass by each other, connect throughout the day of what's going on in your world, what's happening.
Yeah.
And we have this great internal newsletter called Brick by Brick, where we all share what we're working on, even if it's secret.
Oh, nice.
Because a lot of what we do is the behind the scenes work. So, our print team does a lot with Lorna Simpson.
Oh my God, I love her.
A ton of canvases of hers in the shop right now. And Luther, our print shop director, when he first moved to New York, she was one of his great idols, and he had written, I think, his thesis on her. And then as soon as he moved to New York and started working for a print shop that was in the meatpacking, there he was all of a sudden working with Lorna, and now she's entrusted him for 20 plus years to do that part of her process, as do many artists who incorporate printmaking into the layers of either their painting or their fabrication process. So it's really cool to see these greats come in through the shops and just have full respect for our staff, who are all like magicians and masters at what they do.
Where did you guys just feature a really fantastic Lorna Simpson print? I feel like somebody was selling it recently at an art fair. And it was produced at Powerhouse Arts, and I was like, wow, this looks
had
incredible.
an Amy Sherald recently.
Amy Sherald, thank you. That's what I'm thinking about.
So we had an Amy Sherald, which I think was the third one that the print team has done, and that was with Hauser and Wirth. And then we also did Mark Bradford's first large edition that premiered at IFPDA last fall and sold out immediately. And that was a really cool process, because our print team is so tactical and so professional and masterful at what they do. But to take artists' visions who may or may not have experimented in the printmaking process and editions before, and that's the same across our shops too, it holds true for our fabrication teams, they're able to take somebody like Mark's vision and bring that tactility of his work into the print through their various offerings of, let's use this machine that used to be used to print Braille, and that will be part of the process that creates this topographic type of textural, tangible feeling to that print, in such a way that just is like, it blows it out of the water every time. I mean, that was the case with Ava's print as well.
God. It looked like a painting, honestly.
And that was her goal. And it was a beautiful combination of them working with Griffin Editions, and then Luther and the team coming up with this varnish that to render it in a painterly way that Ava was just floored by. So it's incredible.
I look at that print every morning when I wake up, and I'm just, until this day, I'm still amazed. I look at it sometimes like really closely. I'm like, how the hell did they do this? But when I saw the Amy Sherald print, I was like, wow, this is a fantastic print. And then I'm like, of course it was printed at Powerhouse. So, but now that we talked about Powerhouse Arts, let's travel back to California. Let's start with your studies at, because you got your BA in art history at the University of San Diego, right?
That's right,
What made you go into art history?
I loved it. Okay. I always loved art. I've loved art since I was a little kid, and I thought I wanted to be an artist. Like, I loved painting. That was always my favorite class. As I got into high school, though, I was like, not taking anything accelerated, but I thought I would maybe go to art school. And I don't know, I'm just kind of my own worst critic in that way. And I think that became the case too. From, I think, even like pre 9/11, I wanted to get back to New York. I came to New York for the first time with my grandparents when I was 11, and I could feel the energy here. I loved it. So I wanted to come back here for college. I actually wanted to go to Pratt. I had been exploring that. My dad passed away when I was in high school and sort of changed the course of so many things. So I decided to stay close to home, and had an amazing experience in the liberal arts art history program at University of San Diego. And I think that like love and passion for art history came out of being introduced to museums and art. My mom practiced art, was a studio artist and a sculptor before she decided to become a nurse. And my grandparents really fostered that appreciation for the arts in my sister and I when we were kids, taking us to museums and really exposing us to culture. And I grasped onto that. It was just like a different way of seeing the world. And so when I went to University of San Diego, I started out doing art history and studio arts. And I think I had my first sculpture class my freshman year. And it was a small class, and the instructor was a total badass and very intimidating. But you could just tell she had this prowess to her. And I like knew in the first project, I was like, no, I'm not going to be able to do this because I like can't make the case for it. I love artists and art so much, but it was a very quick shift for me to say, like, I'd rather study the artists and the practice and the history, and that's what I fell into. And then thankfully my grandfather was like, what are you going to do? Teach? And I actually did think I was going to go from college to get my master's and teach, or my PhD, but I was like, no, I'm not going to be in school forever. But he very early on said, please, please, please get some business in there. And I'm so grateful for that very first like business class where I learned Excel, because I use it every damn day.
Excel, yeah. Okay. So what was your first job out of school?
So before I graduated, I interned and then got essentially the job as studio gallery manager for the only cool gallery in San Diego. There isn't a huge gallery scene in San Diego. There are some of the more like established mid-tier galleries in La Jolla, and you know, there's a lot of vanity types of galleries. But it was a very cool gallery called Voice 1156. Very community run. Monica, the director, is a photographer, and she came from Drexel in Philly. And it was just this incredible experience where I was doing everything while I was an intern, from writing the press releases and helping whitewash the walls and hang every show and print out the wall labels and cut them on, you know, like it was just everything. And it was really a group effort. So I was managing there, and then applied and worked part-time as a visitor services coordinator or visitor services representative at the Museum of Contemporary Art in San Diego, right when they opened a building downtown. So they expanded from their small original footprint in La Jolla, which is very storied and was there since the 50s, and they had this huge downtown expansion. So it was a really cool time to be there, and that sort of appreciation for especially a cross-border arts culture was growing in San Diego. There was a lot more happening between Tijuana and Mexico and San Diego at the time, so there was a lot of that infused in the curatorial approach to things. So yeah, that was it. And then I'm trying to remember. I think they hired for a visitor services coordinator, and I applied, and it was kind of a strange situation because our team was small, but there were people who were older than me and people who were my peers. And I remember going through that interview process, and this was for a full-time job that I ended up getting and taking, of just like the reality of managing up, managing down, managing across generations, and making the case for yourself very early on that you're capable of doing something, which I was very excited to do. And it was like one of the best introductions to the museum world and essentially the art world for me, because I think that frontline experience, which I always feel connected to with museums or organizations, even currently at Powerhouse, our artist experience coordinators they're in hospitality, you're front of house. Like they're the first person that receives everybody. And I learned so much in that role as this museum was opening about the exhibitions, about who to look out for, whether it was press people or board members, and always be anticipating needs or ways to communicate things with the departments. And it was a great intro into the museum world.
Yeah, I'm sure you took a lot of transferable skills from that job into what you do now.
Yeah. And I was always like working hospitality jobs, hostessing or whatever in the background. So I always feel there's this interplay between the two.
For sure.
And customer service. It is essentially customer service, you know, at the core.
So what was your favorite aspect about that job?
It was just a really interesting time, I think, in San Diego, and this beautiful, it also was a really cool architectural project. It was Richard Gluckman transformed this old train station, like the Santa Fe Depot, which is still a train station. It was an extension of it that they turned into the museum extension. And there was just these huge spaces, gallery spaces, that were meant to be for large-scale sculptural installations, video installations. So the first shows were Ernesto Neto and just the smells, and Aisha Lisa Tilla, and we had I'm blanking, Jennifer Steinkamp, just like gorgeous projection. So I was just starting to see like space become activated and thinking about it in a different way and being a part of the team who realized, you know, we are the carriers of these types of cultural experiences for people, and we have to give them the best, you know, experience possible.
Yeah.
Which is really special.
Yeah, of course. So then what made you leave and move on?
So I was always yearning for New York.
Okay, of course, just in the back of your head.
It stayed there. I studied abroad in Florence during undergrad, and I fell deeper and deeper into love with art history. And I think I was always thinking about how could I get myself to New York, and truly like a constant lover of learning and wanting to always continue growing, always continue challenging myself. So I was really thinking at that time, about 6 months into the visitor services coordinator role, of what would it look like to go to grad school? What would I want that program to be? And it was a really interesting time because it was 2007. So I'm devouring everything from the blogs to every, you know, Vanity Fair philanthropy article I could get my hands on, to everything. And seeing the art world grow and expand from afar and being like, how do I get there? Like I still have, I think it's from Vanity Fair, it's this like constellation system that has all the galleries, all of the advisors. And it's so funny because looking back on it over time, I like realize now all of these people I've made connections with and relationships with.
Now you're in the constellation.
And that was my space. Like that was my space exploration. And I was really thoughtful about thinking how I wanted to approach grad school, what I wanted to do next. And I knew after a lot of thought, I didn't want to teach. You know, I didn't want to go straight from school into a quick job and then into school for a long time again. I really wanted to get some hands-on experience or foray into the art market side of things, but still with that consideration and appreciation of education and nonprofits and the museum world. And so I looked at a lot of grad programs, but really focused on New York, applied to Christie's, Sotheby's, Hunter, and then was looking at some other programs on the East Coast, but came back for interviews and was just super impressed with the Christie's education program, and was so excited when I got accepted. And I knew that was my way out, and that was my way into New York. And I think it was just everything that I wanted. Yeah. I really had to make the case for it. I had to like really figure out how to do it, but it was worth every ounce of everything that it took to get here. And it was an incredible extended education experience for me.
You're like, New York, here I come.
Yeah. And it was full on. I mean, it really was a full on program. I'm really sad that it doesn't exist in the way that it did. I think, you know, there was a lot that I liked about both programs, but there was such a thoughtfulness and seriousness to the program when I got accepted and started in 2007. It was a very small team that were so dedicated to the professional development of all of us. And we were a class of around like 40, 45. From all walks of life, totally international. We had a retired heart surgeon. We had converting lawyers who were thinking about art law and getting into the art world, some banker converts who are doing very well in their roles now, and more of us who were in transition, who had maybe worked a little bit and then come into grad school and were learning the ropes of things. But the connoisseurship, the very overarching through line of understanding the history of the art market and the constant exposure, the Mondays on site at the auction house. It was just like this mind-blowing foray and introduction into the New York art world as I was being inducted into
Yeah.
life as a New Yorker, you know, and it was incredible. It was one of the best times of my life.
Yeah, I'm a former Christie's alum too, so I
Yeah.
absolutely love that program. I'm so sad that it, like you said, it doesn't exist in the same type of context that it did before, because that really taught me what the art world was like.
Yeah.
Because coming out from undergrad, I was like, oh, what do I do? What's happening? And Christie's is like, here it is.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
the weekly professional
Yep.
development, just like the dialogues that you would have, hearing from Amy Capolazzo, hearing
Yep.
from Jeffrey Deitch, hearing from curators, and then going to these places and seeing what they were doing hands-on. I mean, I think my real appreciation for prints started there with our connoisseurship professor, Robin Reisenfeld.
Oh, yeah, Robin, I had her too.
She just, I mean, yeah, really, really incredible people who opened so many people's eyes and doors to a world of us,
Yeah.
into this craziness that we all
100%.
live
It
and
was
breathe
like
now.
it was the wildest program, because we were like
Oh, yeah.
studying art business, and then at one point we had a field trip to like learn how to make paper.
Yeah,
And I was like, okay, yeah, doing it. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy because like a lot of these players are still there, but we're seeing them through different eyes, and
Yeah.
it was really special. Everything about it was everything that I wanted in an introduction to the art world
Yeah.
and to the New York art world, until we all got met with the harsh reality of 2008,
Yes.
and it all came crashing down.
Yep. Very quickly.
But it came crashing down, and I had an internship with Christie's because I thought, oh, I'll go out to LA Christie's in Beverly Hills, try and establish some relationships there for when I go back to California,
Yeah.
knowing in my mind that I didn't want to go back, and was supposed to do post-war and contemporary, and then
That's what everyone
summer-
wanted to do after Christie's. The
well,
post-war and
that was the
contemporary department.
time, and then everything changed.
Yeah.
And that summer, they were like, "No, you're going to be doing California and American paintings." And I was like, "What? That's no."
Yeah.
I was like, "Can I do Trust and Estates on the side? Like what?" And as soon as I got out there, and all things started to change. You started to see the writing on the wall.
Yep.
They started moving the specialists back to New York. They started, consolidating sales. And then as soon as I came back in late November, early December, I lived in South Street. Seaport was the first place I lived in New York. And when my family came back for graduation, my sister and I were walking around. It was like you saw the people leaving the buildings with boxes.
Yeah.
It was just like we saw it all take place in
Yeah.
front of us. And then it was a very different way of looking at things after that.
So then after this, what did you decide to do?
Hustle.
Hustle, yeah.
Try and keep it going for as long as I would be able to. And I think, that was also the grit of our class and of that time. And I think a lot of people was, how do I keep going in this? I love it so much. And so I got a job as a gallery manager part-time that ultimately probably paid me twice, because that
Yeah,
was the
sounds
nature of
about
it
right.
on the Lower East
Yep.
Side during a super harsh winter.
Yep.
I
Been
was
there.
working part-time as support to appraisers at Gerd Johns, because I couldn't hire anybody full-time, and working part-time at a restaurant. So it was this constant juggle. And then in that spring, juggling those few things, I read an article about RX Art, and the gallery director who I worked for was like, "Oh yeah, Diane's right around the corner. You should go check out what they're doing."
Because they were in the Lower East Side too.
Yeah. So RX Art has been on the Lower East Side for a long time.
Yeah.
I think it's been like 12 or 13 years now. And RX Art at the time existed behind the Half Gallery, because Bill Powers was on the board of RX Art. And to take over that space in the building on Forsyth, he took over the front, called it the Half Gallery, and then RX Art was in the back. So I went and met with Diane, and, was just so in awe of the mission of RX Art, and asked if I could just help volunteer in any way.
Yeah.
Because I just needed something to restore my soul during
Yeah,
this gut-wrenching time of how are we going to get through this? We're competing for jobs with it. It
Yes.
was the constant deluge of going out and writing. I I can't imagine how many cover letters I've written in my life. But just the like going to galleries, going for soulless conversations with jobs that I realized I didn't even really want.
Yeah.
And trying to find some like balance of, okay, what do I actually want? And so I volunteered with her for a while. And then that grew into her needing a full-time development person. And I had the museum experience. I had done some development work in San Diego. And yeah, so I worked with her for a little while in 2009 before I made...
But then you left.
I left. It was a hard moment in life. And I do try and like create a balance of commitment to my family and personal priorities. And my grandfather got sick. And so it was just one of those moments in time where you reckon with it.
Yeah.
And it was super hard. He was one of the greatest advocates and supporters of me and believed in me so much and really made so much possible for what I did, that it was so gut-wrenching to be gone as he was getting sick that I knew that I would not be able to live with the reality of not being there, not being able to spend that time. So it was a really hard decision. And it was still its own pandemic. It was the financial pandemic of that time. It was still the recession. It was hard to make that decision because I loved what I was doing at RXR. I was so happy. I felt like I was on top of the world and things were finally starting to make sense. And I remember, having that conversation with Diane, and it's like, I didn't want to leave, but I knew I needed to make that decision to do it. So I went home, and that's why I went home. And here I was, in my mid-20s, living back at home with my mom, looking for a job all over Southern California because it was still the recession. It was scarcity. Looking all over from LA to San Diego and miraculously getting yet an entry-level job at the Museum of Contemporary Art again.
Okay.
New team, new advancement team and director. And it was hard to be back there because it was part-time. I was commuting from Orange County with my mom, where my mom lives, to San Diego 3 days a week.
What's the commute like? Because I'm unaware.
2 hours each way.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, this harkens back to my Magazino days when I was commuting upstate. So I get it. Okay. Yeah. That's tough.
So a lot of phone calls with my friends in New York before podcasts existed, sadly. Lots of music. And just trying to like soothe my soul. But it was weird because I also feel like in that time, I just like mentally slowed down. I was so present with being there for why I needed to be there and being with my family that I think I just swallowed that pride. I swallowed that frustration in a lot of ways to just be where I needed to be at that time. And it was really fortuitous because even though it was frustrating to be there, frustrating to have your master's and be in an entry-level position. And I remember walking in for my interview and people on the development team were like, wait, why are you here?
You're like,
left.
You're back?
And one of my best friends still, who's now here in New York, was running retail. And she's like, wait, what are you doing? You're just visiting family? And I'm like, no, I'm gonna work here part-time again.
Hi guys, I'm back.
Why? No, you're not supposed to be doing that. And so I ended up getting hired full-time, but it was
In what role did you get hired full time?
So I was an advancement assistant, but it was really interesting. New development perspective, same director who was there for a very long time, but a great team otherwise at a time when they were really activating the downtown extension in new ways. I was really given the gift of starting to roll out a moves management system, so helping the development team create a way to create prospecting opportunities from new people coming into the museum to looking at board relationships and their portfolios of planned giving to think about future asks and proposals for the director to have with them, for the advancement director to have with them. So they kind of just gave it to me, and it was the first for that. So it was like a gift of being able to figure it out, working with the database, pulling reports, and creating systems for regular meetings. And it was frustrating because I wasn't able to advance any of that.
Yeah.
I was, inside being like, this is the strategy, you should do this. But of course, it's relationships too, and it's people, and whoever the people are that are doing that, that's who does it. You can't control that side of it when you're on the admin side, when you're on the support side in development and in fundraising work, because you can't go out and either like really deepen those relationships for them, or you just don't have no control over it. So it was interesting to be able to do that, to work more with the finance team and the board to really like reconcile board giving. So it was like my first foray into working more with the board and with major donors. And then launching a new young patrons group. So it was like a pretty exciting time. We did an amazing exhibition called Viva la Revolucion before MoCA did their Art in the Streets, where it was just like this total takeover of downtown San Diego with street artists. It was just a really exciting time. Coming out of this really dark time. But in the back of my mind, I constantly was craving being back here. It was really hard to not be here.
New York will not leave you alone.
No, it will never. And that's okay.
Okay, so you're still there and you're like, I eventually want to go back to New York. So what was the tipping point where you're just like, you know what, I'm going back to New York?
So I had it in my mind. I, spent my time with my family and moved down to San Diego once I got hired full time, and had various things that were pulling me back to New York beyond my yearning for being here, among it like friendships and interests and things like that.
Okay.
So it was there, and I was always tapping into my network of peers and fellow alum, and had some conversations with my peers who were at Christie's, who did stay at Christie's in the auction house, and got an interview with Amy Capolazzo to be her assistant. And it was on Skype, so it was before the days of Zoom.
Oh, yes, Skype, the original Zoom.
And I just remember picking out my dress so it would look good on camera, but wasn't wearing heels, and I just felt so weird. Okay. Like I was like, can I please come back to New York for this interview? But they were trying to move it along so quickly. And it was like rapid fire. It was so intense. I knew that it would be that way, but it was just this really incredible experience having that opportunity. I didn't get it, obviously. Oh. They hired somebody internally, but I had a good exchange with her via email, thanking her for her time. And I was just so driven. So I was like, I'm going to go back. And I came back for Armory. I think that was like 2009. I can't remember time. I don't know. Came back.
Time does not exist.
And met up with a friend from grad school, walked in, it was super snowy, and it was just like I had gotten off the plane, came straight to Armory, and I saw Amy walking down an aisle with somebody, and I just went up to her and introduced myself, and she was with a collector, but I was just so brazen. I was like, I just want, to thank her in person, make her, know that. And so she was like, well, you're fine. She's like, look, you're here. You're making it happen for yourself. You're going to be fine. So I was like, okay, that's what I need to know. And it was that trip that I talked to another colleague from Christie's about starting our own art advisory. Because back in the day of juggling all of the things, the gallery manager, the Gurjons, appraisals, we were doing gallery tours through the Lower East Side when it was just starting to take root as galleries forming there. And so we talked about, could we really turn this into a business? And we did. And so I put together a business plan for us. She was a funder of it, and we got it off the ground, and that's what became Artelier. And so it was this huge leap of faith. But I also knew, like, okay, we can do this. I can get this off the ground. It got me back to New York. We launched it. And it was really fun. It was a different approach to advisory. We were not trying to do anything really along the lines of advisory the way it is now. It was much more of a holistic educational approach for people who are just getting started collecting and want more of the maybe educational process, if you will. So seminar series, studio visits. It was a lot of fun. Curated itineraries. It was sort of like, the tourism meets academia
Okay.
meets introductory advisory was the model. And so we launched it. We had a lot of fun, and it was slowly getting started. And unfortunately, about 6 months into it, my partner in it pulled out as the funder of it.
Yeah.
She was going through a lot. It was, just what she had to do. And so I was contemplating ways to keep it afloat. But it wasn't viable. I think it would have been a struggle to try and keep it going the way I wanted to keep it going and make a living for myself, even if I was juggling this, that, and the other. So I did juggle this, that, and the other, and worked on the Venice Biennale when Sarah Z was representing us, and was hostessing at a restaurant all summer, which was super fun and like a great touch back into that world. And I was for a moment thinking, should I just give the art world up completely?
No.
And I had the come to Jesus talk with two of my friends, and they were like, you've worked so hard. You've been all over the place, but you've come so far. You can't quit now. But that was when I really got focused and used that time to have my job and be outside of the art world, have that sort of regular schedule, and then think really specifically about what I wanted to do, how I wanted to get back in development, and knew that I wanted to be back on the museum side. So I was much more focused about how I was applying to jobs, and that's when Museum of Arts and Design came up. So
Okay.
moved back into that.
And then you, what position were you at? Did you have at the Museum of Art and Design?
I was the manager of major gifts.
Okay.
So a like fairly good sized development team for a museum of that size. But it was just myself and our VP of development, who he really oversaw all major gifts and then the board relationships, and never wanted to be the development director because he was just so seasoned and such a lone wolf. I mean, this is Michael Govin's right-hand man when he started DIA, but he also came from Southern California. He had worked for USC and for a massive philanthropist in Texas and the East Coast. So he had his hands in all these things before he went to DIA and before he came to MAD. And he was such a good teacher and mentor for me. And everybody was like, wait, Alan doesn't like to work with anybody. What are you doing here? I'm like, I don't know. I think we can work really well together.
Like, he's gonna be my new best friend.
I was good cop, he was bad cop. Okay. And so that's how we worked with the rest of the development team, with the director, with the board. And it was a lot of tough love and learning, but he taught me so much. And it was also such a crazy time because the director changed about 3 months into me starting there. And then we went through an interim period where there was no director, and then came Glenn Adamson, and that was a whole new world and a whole new chapter for the museum because he really brought this new wave of thinking and the movement of the maker to MAD and to craft in America from V&A, and I think really ambitious and risk-taking ways at the time that a lot of people were like up against, and he met a lot of resistance, and I'm so happy to see him doing what he's doing and just continuing to make waves from the way that he's doing it. But it was a challenging time because there was so much change because we were really trying to shift the mission and open up more like awareness and inclusivity and like understanding of what making is from this old staid craft perspective that it had been for so long. So it was an interesting time to try and like wrangle donors who had been there and had been involved since the old days and try and convince them, come with us on this journey. Like this is the whole new world. We have to get on board.
People are always like averse to change, so you always have to like convince them and be like, come on.
Yeah So it was an interesting time to be there for sure.
Okay. And how long were you there for?
It was about 3 years.
Okay.
But 3 years of a lot of transition and in all of the ways, but there were some really exciting exhibitions. I've worked with some incredible curators. Lowry Sims is just like an icon. Loved working with her. Ron Labaco did this show called Out of Hand, which was all digital design. So it was really like that period for shifting the course of what craft is and what design is in this really like cross-disciplinary way. Was an exciting time to be there, and I learned so much about the design world that I had never known before. That was like my introduction to that side, and I'm so grateful for that because it's something I love, and I see so much more there. It's just like expanded my world since then.
Yeah. So then you went back to RX Art, right?
I did.
After Mad?
I did.
Yeah. Tell us how that happened.
So I remember I applied, I was thinking about it, and I didn't want to leave. I had thought about getting a job at MoMA during this time. It was, it was a crazy time, and there was a lot going on in New York at the time too. This was like, I left for RX Art in 2015, and I really wanted more ownership in my role and in my development work at MAD. But because it was such a shifty time for the focus, for the vision, with the board, with a constantly changing team, it was a really hard time to make a place for myself in the things that I was ambitious to do in terms of like growing professionally and helping the organization grow. And so I wasn't looking for a job when this happened, and somebody sent me something on Knife, and I saw that she was looking for a development director. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because she had kind of just like, things had been the same for a long time, but we would still catch up. We would get coffee or drinks from time to time, and catch up in my process of going back to California and coming back to New York. And I looked at her website. I was looking at everything. I saw the board had changed a little bit. I saw that the projects were starting to evolve, that they were starting to work with PR, and that it was just like, okay, she's hired a operations manager. Okay, like she's getting serious. And I think I really saw it as a chance for me to go and have an impact in everything, like not just be a cog in the development wheel as a part of a huge museum, but be able to go and help build something into something more. And I remember I asked Lowry to be one of my references because she had been on Diane's original board. She was like, are you crazy? She's like, don't you want to go someplace like MoMA? And I was like, no, they offered me a job.
Yeah.
I want to be, I really want to build the relationships with funders around missions that I really care about. Not that I don't care about MoMA, and that wasn't super exciting. But I think for me, it's really the most important thing in a development role is being passionate about the mission and being able to. I never wanted to do gallery sales because I always hated my gallery roles. It was hard for me to be put on to try and do sales when I didn't feel authentically like connected to the work or the ability to talk about the work in whatever way. And development is very much the same thing. And I saw that I could make an impact there. And so...
I mean, RX Art has a very unique mission.
Very.
They fund artist projects in children's hospitals. So when these kids go to these very bleak places, they have these beautiful things to look at. Yeah.
And I think with that in mind, and having a mom who's a nurse, and since then having gone through health experiences of my own, it really, when I was thinking about it, it's such a beautiful mission, is, the mission of helping children heal through the power of art. And it really is the power of experiences and environments, right? And this is something that rings true to this day. Like, I got into the world of art because it made me feel something. And I think constantly this is my way of evaluating where I'm at with my connection and my professional role, or my connection to art or anything, is like, if we're in it, we get into this because we want to feel something, but it has to keep making you feel good. And that's such a part of the work that RX Art is doing. And so I made that shift, and
Was Diane, was she happy to have you back?
yeah. I mean, we went, and I was like, oh, let's get a drink and catch up. And she thought I just wanted to catch up. And I said, so what's going on? I saw that your board is evolving, and, it sounds like you're doing some exciting things. And at the end of it, I said, well, you're looking for a new development director. I want to be that person for you. And she said, okay, well, write me a kick-ass cover letter. And I went home and I did it that night. Like it was so easy. And it was,
because you did a million cover letters before.
Yeah. But this was, I mean, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about the possibilities. And, there's so much there. And it was really exciting. I was there for almost 8 years, and a lot changed in the time that I was there. We grew together. I grew so much, and we were really able to evolve the impact and the projects and scale up. And I think a huge part of that is thanks to a really committed board who are very dedicated to seeing things through. And the artists give it as much. I think one of the first projects, it was the first project that we talked about when I was interviewing, was Cedar Sinai, and it was 3 artists. It was Urs Fisher, Laura Owens, and Sam Falls, and they each had about 5 rooms that were inpatient rooms, and they were going to do the ceilings. So we sold the rooms like naming rights, both in advance, and then we had a party. Our first RXR LA party was in Malibu, and it was just this really cool conversion of an arts experience and architecture, all at the core of helping a kid's healing process. And the parents and the health care, all of the staff help that experience be that much more bearable, if it can be. And I just remember being so excited. And Laura, I mean, every artist gives like 1,000% to an RXR project.
I can see all the
except
projects.
for one. And
you
shall
won't
remain
share? Okay,
nameless
fine.
forevermore.
Fine.
That in my time, but truly, like, Laura was putting as much, they all did something different for the rooms. It was incredible. And like, Laura was preparing for her Whitney retrospective at the time, and there were just elements that were like, little freezes of birds and things that when you went to the Whitney show, it was like, oh cool, like that's what kids see in this room. And it was really special. The feedback and the stories that we got from those projects is why like everybody does it, why they support it, why everybody that works with RXR does it.
I mean, you've changed people's lives.
And I think the artists, it's so special to see the artists feel that way too. Nicholas Party specifically, like, was getting his project started right before the pandemic, and then had time upstate to focus on his preparations. But for an artist who a lot of his projects are ephemeral, and they're these beautiful installations of pastels that last for only a few months, it was really challenging and kind of daunting to think about. All of the projects are meant to be and are really established to be at least 5-year loans or installations, if you will. And
so what happens after?
Ultimately, it's a contract with the hospital where it's a agreement where the goal is for it to be kept up. Clearly, walls have to change and things like that happen. So the goal is always for the projects to have a long life and there to be longevity, and which is why Dan Cullen is a one-of-a-kind Michelangelo masterpiece of a project that was all hand-painted, but why the majority of the projects have been scalable into easily fabricated wall coverings that can be hospital grade, that are able to be like bumped up against, and if they have to tear down a wall or replace this, then we can reprint that. So that's
I mean, it's beautiful. I found out about RXR obviously through Magazino in the early stages, and I fell in love with the mission. And you guys have always worked with these incredible artists, like blockbuster artists, who were always like so happy to do these projects and everything like that. So it was definitely a beautiful mission.
Yeah.
What was your favorite part about it? Was it seeing these projects completed?
Yeah. I mean, I think what we all wish more was that we could experience it more. But, that said, the goal of working with such established artists is, on one hand, because there's the goal of trying to introduce museum quality installations into hospitals, oftentimes that are in communities where there is not an exposure to culture. So not only are these kids and their families and the staff going through it with the seriousness and the fragility that's happening in those spaces, but they may be in a community where they don't have a museum, they don't have an introduction to the art world or to artists of that caliber. And more there has been that addition of like the wall labels, the QR codes, so families can learn more. With the William Wegman project in Flint, Michigan, we created and incorporated some of his existing video work of the Weimaraners into our website. So when you scan the QR code in the waiting room where his photographs were, you would be able to watch some of his videos. You'd learn more and you'd see more of his like style of work and like get to know it more. And then now that they're doing so many more projects with New York Health and Hospitals, Nina Chanel Abney's project is a total takeover that is both inside and visible from the outside of Elmhurst Hospital. And that's really the mentality. So seeing those projects come to life was everything. And I think we would get family reactions. There's so much more of that I think they're working on now too, with more research and more levels of kind of like arts education engagement. It's hard to scale it in a way because each child life team at every hospital is so different. And they have their own priorities, clearly. But that's what the coloring books are a beautiful gift for, which is such an awesome project in and of itself, too.
I have one of them.
They're the best. And so the goal of creating the coloring books is to give them, the majority of them, to hospitals. So that's like an easy gift and intro to the hospitals. But hearing from the staff, the nurses, we would often get most of the testimonials and the stories from them directly. And when you hear that, when we did Rob Pruitt's project at Chalk in Orange County, California, for one, it was like so cool because it was like it came through relationships I have from Orange County. Yeah. And he did the entire radiology department. It was like all of the corridors and the CT scanner. And the staff in the first like 2.5 months, when we did the ribbon cutting, we met an 8-year-old girl who had been receiving scans since she was 2. And these are experiences that the kids are so freaked out by. But then when it changes and when they can see it differently, it becomes something that they actually look forward to. So it was really incredible to hear a couple of different instances, like right when that project got installed, of kids like really being calm, and it changing the entire experience of them having to go in for an emergency CT scan. So it's really like knowing how great the impact is for the kids and for the families is everything. And clearly that's what the artists see in it as well, and why so many unbelievable artists commit to it.
I wish RX Art honestly extended beyond the borders of US and Canada, because I mean, I was a very sickly child when I was little, so I was in and out of hospitals in Poland, and those hospitals are terrifying, and those experiences are terrifying. And just knowing if I had such a different experience like these children get to have, it would have had a completely different impact for me.
Completely.
Yeah. So this mission is really wonderful.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing all of your stories with me today. And as a final question for today, I always ask, what advice would you give to incoming women in the art world? Because you've been through it.
Yeah, my trajectory has not been linear.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that it doesn't have to be. Honestly, I think when I came to New York too, I didn't have relationships here. I didn't have any connections. And I think that what I've grown to know, especially now in fundraising and the way I approach relationship building and cold outreach and every door that I've had to open for myself, is that I didn't have anybody to open those doors for me when I got here and when I had my entry into the world, other than, through the graduate program and introductions, but you really have to create them for yourself. And the hardest thing that you can anticipate is that sometimes you're going to get a no, but if you're thoughtful about the way you approach trying to get your foot in the door or creating new connections, or going after something that you really want, is if it's thoughtful and it's authentic and really like you're passionate about it, doors will open for you. And it's really important to also support each other and constantly help each other with that process, which is something that I've always done and I feel is so important in everything that I continue to do, whether it's for interns that I had at RX Art or even MAD, and just that relationship support system is really, really crucial to the growth process.
You are the biggest networking girl I know. You
Oh my God,
connect
no.
people. I mean, I found out about the Female Design Council because of you, which is another great thing that you're part of.
Yeah.
So you are always trying to connect to everybody, which I really appreciate because, we really do need to help each other.
I think that's a huge thing that immediately was a draw for me at Powerhouse when I came in as a client and was like, what is happening here? What's the ethos of this space and this organization? And it's that ability to just be open to collaboration, and that is what I do at work. That is what is being done in the spaces that I hold space in, that I'm a part of, these communities that I'm a part of. I mean, that the way that Laura and the Female Design Council open up space and resources for everybody is, I'm starting to see it in other organizations and other fields, but there's such a yearning for that I think in the bio, one of the things that I started during the pandemic was a fundraising support group that was like a small core of the people that I knew who were in development the first few weeks of the pandemic. And then it grew and people would come and go and it would just be these Zooms. And I really want to try and resurrect that because we all need to lean on each other. And there's nothing like that really comes out of holding back or holding things close to your chest. I think you get more out of sharing resources and sharing information
100%.
and doing things through collaboration.
Yeah, those are very wonderful words to end on and head into the fire round questions.
Yeah, okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so you pick a number between 1 and 10 and then I read the corresponding question for you.
Okay, 7.
7, lucky number 7, okay. What is something that you think everyone should experience in their lifetime?
I will say this is a recent experience and staying art specific. I was up in the Catskills and have only ever experienced a James Turrell lightscape or, something in a fair. And at the Catskill, what's it called? Art Space? Yeah. They have a James Turrell that I believe is from the 90s.
Oh, wow.
And it is the most incredible art experience I've ever had in my life. And you walk in and you have to somebody from the center guided us, gave us the instructions. And so I'm with my partner and there's this piece of tape on the wall. And as you start to go into the space, there's a black curtain. You have to touch the tape along the wall. And you have to curve this corner and your goal is to find a bench inside and you're going to be in total darkness, and you are in total darkness. Like as soon as you start walking down this hallway, you can't see anything. It's the wildest thing I've ever experienced. So you're walking down this dark hallway and you find your way into this bench, and we made it to the bench. But it's so dark and my eyes were having the hardest, like I couldn't see.
Yeah.
I felt nauseous. And it's your mind trying to figure out that this sense is no longer available to you. And what do you do with that? Like I got so kerfuffled that I wanted to get up and leave. I was like,
Okay.
no, I'm going to find my way out of here. But you're instructed to sit down and slowly let your eyes adjust. And then slowly in front of you, this semblance of light will start to materialize. And it did so slowly. You have to just like shift your eyesight. And then eventually you get up and you move towards it. And it is this very, very minimal James Turrell light wallscape that's built into the wall. So the perspective is crazy because you feel like you're just falling into something where the light is, but it's just a recessed space. But the whole experience was just you lose control. And it's this sense of how our senses allow us to have control. And the ability to not see when it's so important to us. It's so important to what we do and everything. It was just this wild experience.
I have to experience this now.
It made me think about so many deep things and ways that I approach life and the ways that we navigate through life, needing to be able to maneuver through things and have control over how we maneuver things, that it takes it all away entirely from you, and you're left with just like the rest of your senses trying to fill in the space.
First of all, I'm one of those people who's like, anytime I see a curtain in a gallery or museum space, I'm so excited because I'm like, what is waiting for me on the other side?
Yeah. Oh, there's no way to photograph or describe this to you or give this to you other than having to experience it.
Okay,
So
I have to go
I
now.
wish for everybody to experience that.
That's actually a great tip for everybody listening, because I'm definitely going.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have question for one more.
Okay.
Time for one more.
Okay. 3.
3. You're picking my favorite numbers. If you could talk to anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Ooh.
Doesn't have to be art related if you don't want it to be.
That's hard. I would really like to talk to my dad.
Oh.
On an emotional,
Yeah.
personal level. The work that he did was with the land and irrigation and farming. And I think outside of professional life and everything else, like I need to connect so much with nature outside of things, and especially being in this like pulsating, constantly stimulating concrete jungle. It's just so important to go touch grass sometimes.
Yes.
And I think I've just been thinking about him so much lately with that and how he approached like, life and like reveling in nature and growth and things like that. And I don't know. It's just, he's somebody that's been absent from my life for so long that it'd be nice to like tell him and share all of this with him.
Yeah.
But I think I do that in like some spiritual ways.
I'm sure.
Sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm sure he's proud of you too.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that's where we always connect to, because you and me are very connected to our families and to nature.
Yeah.
So I completely get where you're coming from.
Yeah, very much.
Well, thank you for sharing all your stories.
Of course. Thank you.
You gave us a lot to think about, I'm sure, to my listeners and everybody. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. And to everybody watching, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you. Bye.